Thanks to Marvel, the United States has finally discovered Tony Leung. Art house folks would know him from the movies of Wong Kar-wai and Zhang Yimou. Action film fans may know him from Hard Boiled or Infernal Affairs. In 2021, Leung hit the American consciousness as one of the first truly great Marvel villains after Michael B. Jordan. I want to talk about his pulpiest, most mainstream movie. And no, not Hard Boiled, which is also great. I mean John Woo's ambitious attempt to film the classic novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or at least a little section of it, a little 4-hour section. Chibi, or Redcliffe. This movie, which is in 2 parts in the spirit of Harry Potter or Twilight, follows an uneasy alliance between 2 super genius strategists, played by the smoldering Tony Leung as Zhou Yu and the impossibly sexy Takeshi Kaneshiro as Zhuge Liang, who are pitted against the equally wily Prime Minister Cao Cao. Apologies in advance for my terrible pronunciation. Leung was actually only added due to a scheduling conflict for Chow Yun-fat, who would have made a colder, much more calculating Zhou Yu. Leung brings his trademark sad eyes and imbues the character with a sense of worry. The script takes some liberties with the role of Zhou Yu's wife, who in the novels only briefly alluded to, but here becomes the primary motivation of Cao Cao's invasion of the Southlands, and casting the wistfully romantic Tony Leung gives that subplot, which I might not think was entirely necessary, emotional weight. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, in my humble opinion, is the greatest Chinese novel ever. Contemporaneous with the Divine Comedy or the Canterbury Tales, it's as sprawling and complicated as those 2 Western classics. Its style is brusque and direct, but the strategic machinations of the characters and the iconic storylines, they are world class. Based on real people and events, and the legends that grew up around them, this book follows hundreds of heroes during a period when the Han Dynasty was crumbling into war-torn chaos. At least 24 of these heroes are timeless characters. A couple of them are even worshipped as gods. Many movies have been made about this massive novel, picking out this story or that. TV series have attempted to capture the whole thing, and the 1994 version, which utilized thousands of PRC soldiers as extras, did a pretty impressive job at 90 hours, although it of course cut out any of the supernatural stuff because the party wouldn't have liked that. This movie similarly sidesteps any supernatural elements, and tosses in some impish subversions of expectations for fans of the book. Wisely, it only attempts to adapt a handful of the central chapters of this massive novel. Before I get too far into this, I gotta say, this movie includes the coolest large-scale war scene I've ever seen, better than Saving Private Ryan or The Two Towers or Lawrence of Arabia. It's based on the idea that the Bagua, the 8 trigrams, has almost magical powers. Zhuge Liang, the master strategist, uses it to create an unbeatable formation to slaughter Cao Cao's land forces, and we get to see all the heroes in action in this scene. Wu also includes the Battle of Changban and obviously the climactic Battle of Redcliffe or Chibi. It's all extremely epic. So, what's it all about? Liu Bei, a cousin of the Emperor, unites with a rival king, Sun Quan, and the movie focuses on the rivalry between their military advisors, the aforementioned Zhuge Liang and Zhou Yu. This story is stuffed with amazing characters, and it would be impossible to skip over them. They get some really butt-kicking scenes that mean even more to you if you've been dreaming of seeing these guys on screen your whole life. I mean, you've got Zhang Fei, who's a mountainous bludgeon of a man who punches horses and uses bodies as weapons, and Chao Yun, the unbeatable D'Artagnan of the group, whose baby-saving antics inspired the best scene in Hard Boiled by John Woo as well. And most of all, Guan Yu. He is the paragon of honor, he is the most fearsome warrior on the battlefield of all time, and he is now worshipped as the god of war and the god of loyalty. This movie doesn't go into it, but Guan Yu also has a debt of honor with their enemy Cao Cao, who treated Guan Yu royally when he was a prisoner of war. He gave him the spectacular red hair horse, he gave him a special bag to protect Guan Yu's awesome beard, but also, sneakily, Cao Cao tried to trick Guan Yu into sleeping with Liu Bei's wives, which Guan Yu avoided by sleeping sleeplessly standing guard outside their tent. There is, by the way, a mediocre movie with the wonderful Donnie Yen as Guan Yu that deals with that part of the story. Wu decided to include a different moment of awesome, Guan Yu facing off with Cao Cao's entire army. Now, Guan Yu has the chance to kill Cao Cao, but the Prime Minister turns his back on him. He knows that Guan Yu is so chivalrous he would never stab a man in the back. Guan Yu escapes with his life, Cao Cao smirks at his own cleverness. But these characters so central to the novel are side attractions here. Cao Cao, Zhou Yu, and Zhuge Liang, often called Kong Ning, are the center of this movie. If I have any complaint with this film, it's that the spectacular performances by Tony Leung and Takeshi Kaneshiro, as well as Zhao Wei, who I'll get to in a moment, overwhelm the trio of warriors, Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, who are in the novel the main attraction. Yeah, it's a 4-hour movie, but I want it to be longer. In the book, Zhou Yu and Zhuge Liang straight out try to get each other killed. But here, it's much more of a John Woo-style bromance. And that brings me to the Subversion that I mentioned earlier. These stories are known to just about everybody in the Chinese diaspora, so if you mention the 3 visits to Zhuge Liang's cottage or Kong Ming collecting the arrows, everybody knows what you're talking about. The scene I just mentioned with Cao Cao turning his back is a setup for the end of the Battle of Red Cliff, which is not actually shown. Zhuge Liang in the novel stations Guan Yu at the northern route away from the battle, knowing that he's going to let Cao Cao escape. Guan Yu's debt of honor to the evil Prime Minister is too important for even this massive war to distract him, and so thus Zhuge Liang sets up the 3 kingdoms' balance of power, with Cao Cao in the north, Liu Bei in the west, and Sun Quan in the southeast. But the movie instead gives a kind of dumb Hollywood-esque conclusion. Cao Cao is defeated and humiliated, and in the novel, an aging general at one point offers to be beaten and then falsely defect to Cao Cao's forces. The movie calls this out as an obvious stratagem, which it is, and substitutes Zhou Yu's wife for the role. Similarly, in the book, Sun Quan marries off his war-loving sister to Liu Bei as part of the peace treaty. In the film, Liu Bei proposes to Sun Changxiang, and he is turned down flat. She goes on to become the heroine of the second act of the film, using her martial skills and clever ideas to win the battle and her brother's respect. She's played by the gorgeous, tomboyish Zhao Wei, who you might know from Shaolin Soccer, and she is the best cast Hua Mulan of all time. Apologies to Ivy Ling Po and cartoon Ming-Na Wen. John Woo also uses Sun Xiangxiang to underline the basic tragedy of war. Great people die on all sides. While undercover, Sun befriends Sun Chucai, an athletic but dull-witted captain in Cao Cao's army, who dies in front of her during the final battle. It is definitely the most emotional scene in the film. While most John Woo movies are smaller in scale, basically 2 guys learn to trust each other while taking down the big bad, I was happy they chose Woo to take on the task of adapting this massive novel. Back in the 90s, while other auteurs like Wong Kar-wai, Anne Hui, Zhang Yimou, and Ang Lee sought to make Chinese cinema respected, Wu made it fun. He out-Peckinpah'd Peckinpah. He made Clint Eastwood movies look really tame. Outside of Japan, there was no action movie director who could keep up with him. That kind of clarity is exactly what was needed when bringing the central portion of Sangguo, the 3 kingdoms, to the screen. Massive wuxia-style fights, melodramatic character arcs, 2 enemies coming together to face off with the big bad. Now, this is not subtle cinema, but it is fantastic, and Tony Leung, Takeshi Kaneshiro, and Zhao Wei make it work.